Hello and welcome to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, the podcast for all things marketing. And this week we're talking to a marketing agency co-founder about their journey from startup to maturity and what can be learned from that experience. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so I said a few weeks ago that I've got some really interesting interviews lined up, and having just spoken to Lucy Halley and Malika Kalkar, I am completing the trilogy this week. I am joined by Craig Wheeler, co-founder and managing director of the CRM loyalty and CX specialist agency WDMP. Welcome to the podcast, Craig.
Thank you, Rob. And I quite like being part of a trilogy. It makes me sound like a character out of Star Wars. So yeah, it's lovely to be here. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
The only problem, though, is the third one is always a dodgy one. So we're looking to buck that trend, today. We always start every interview with what I call the credibility question, just so that people who are listening from around the world and who don't know who you are can get a sense of your background and why your opinions are what your opinions are. So would you mind giving us a bit of a background of your career in marketing to date, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah, and I'll try and keep it brief because I don't want to send everybody to sleep straight away on the first question. But I graduated with an honours degree, specialising in marketing, and that was in the early '90s. And it was quite difficult to get into agencies in the early '90s, and so I got a job as a sales rep. And worked as a sales rep for a year, which enabled me to get a job in a sales promotion agency. Do you remember sales promotion
I
agencies?
do. I'm old enough, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I worked on the likes of Coca-Cola, Capri Sun, Sprite, etc. And then after about 4 or 5 years, I got headhunted by the marketing store because they had PepsiCo, and I went across to head up the PepsiCo business, doing instant win promotions for the likes of Walkers, Doritos, Pepsi, and Tango, and so forth. So putting £20 notes into packets of crisps.
What, in the little blue envelopes?
That's the one. Yeah,
I remember that.
that's the one.
That
Yeah,
promotion. That ran for a while, didn't it?
yeah, they worked amazingly well.
Mm.
And then I moved on and was part of two agency startups. But frustratingly, I was always the junior partner, without any equity. So got a little bit frustrated, and then in 2002, back into 2002, I set up WDMP with my brother, who was the ex-client, and here we are, 20 years later.
So it's a fascinating background that you built this thing over the last 20 years. What was it that made you want to go out on your own and start your own thing? What was the kind of catalyst? Is it personality? Was it that you just wanted to do that? Was it one specific thing that just made you think, right, let's do this now?
I think it was lots of reasons, if I'm honest. Partly I was fed up of working for other people. I'd learned firsthand a lot of the mistakes people make setting up an agency, having been part of those two startups, the mistakes that are made, running an agency.
Mm-hmm.
And, I thought I could do it better. And so did Gavin as well. But I think most importantly, Gavin, as the ex-client, and myself had a vision of creating an agency that put the client first. Gavin had worked at large corporates like Amazon and what was back then NTL and became Virgin Media.
Mm.
And he had a real frustration of working with large agencies and as a client having to respond to something in the market, in the marketplace. But it would just take forever to get something out. So he had this sort of frustration, and the marketing store had been an amazing experience for me, and they really taught me how to be empathetic with clients. And so, I think our overriding ambition was to build something that put the clients first.
Right.
So the clients were more important than the agency process. For example, don't let the process get in the way of doing great work for the clients.
Yeah.
And to get closer to their business and to really understand the challenges that they have and to help solve them. So Gavin used to talk to everyone, all our staff, about what it was like, the day in the life of a client, and how an agency is just a small snapshot, in their
Yeah.
day. So, it was about walking in their shoes and being in the trenches with them. But I think there was another point about having fun as well, because Gavin and I had felt a lot of the fun had gone out of marketing. And so, we really wanted to build something that everybody enjoyed being part of. And we
Yeah.
always said, quite naively, that we'd rather be 80% successful and have fun along the way than
Yeah.
be 100% successful and not have fun and not enjoy it. So no silver bullet.
Okay.
Lots of reasons behind doing it.
No, it's interesting, and I think the client, as you know, and having we've worked together in the past, but as you know, my background obviously is client and an agency side, and that bit about the agency being a small part of your day, and the reverse, obviously, the client is everything. The
Yeah,
agency side, or at least it should be, is really a really interesting one. You talked there about you'd seen the mistakes that other when you worked at other agencies that have been made as those agencies those grew. So what did you think were the biggest challenges you faced? What were the mistakes that you were determined to avoid when you did your own thing?
I mean, how long have you got?
About
The two
half
starters.
an hour.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you two top line examples, so one I went to on the back of a design agency, and I need to be a little bit careful, based out in Berkshire. We
Hmm.
set up a sort of integrated sales promotion type agency that, I helped them set up. But these two guys had worked for themselves for like 15, 20 years, and they were still in Victorian times when it came to kind of running a team, working with a team, engaging the team. It was a real har and far mentality, and it was their way or the highway. And they just
Yeah,
burned through. They had lots of very young marketeers who they just burned through. So that was one major lesson about bringing the team on board and letting them have a say. The other one is a bit kind of local that, my first agency startup, I was the junior partner, and I bought into the fact that the other four partners had all run an agency
right,
for, quite a long time, 10, 15 years. And basically it merged two small agencies into one, and they got backing from a French marketing group.
right.
And we were at the London office.
Yeah,
And we left the CEO to refurbish the offices in central London, Floral Street and Covent Garden,
right.
and
Nice.
we all moved down to the offices in Hammersmith. And I remember being in a boardroom when all the works were done and everything, and the refurbishment, which looked amazing. We all moved back in, and it was all fantastic. And I remember being in this board meeting, and someone went, "Oh, what's this line in the P&L?" And the CEO went, "Oh, well, that's the refurbishment cost." It's like, well, hold on a minute. The refurbishment cost was £125,000, and he'd spent £360,000 on the refurbishment. And there was just this moment in the boardroom, and I was like looking around, going, "Well, hold on a minute. You guys are supposed to know what you're doing," because that was basically like, our first 2 years' profit had just basically just been wiped out, and it's like, well,
To make a
so,
fancy agency.
and then every board meeting there was a massive argument, and I'd be sitting there going, "Is this what being a board director is all about?" Because it's my first board director. It's just like, is this? You just have arguments and fight amongst each other and stuff
Mm,
like that. So lots and lots of learnings, really.
yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I remember, I think it was Barack Obama once said, he said, when I started out in local politics, he said, when I move up to the next level, everyone's going to be grown ups and it's going to be great. And then he got to the Senate and is like, really? Okay, maybe when I get to the White House and I become the president, everything will be people will be grown ups. And then he got to president, it's like, no, people are just people, whatever level they're at, which I think is quite an interesting one. One of the things I think strategically is interesting about an agency, especially one that's growing, is sort of figuring out not only what you will do, but what you won't do. Because I imagine every now and again somebody will come to you and say, "Can you do this?" And it may not be part of your core offering, but when you're starting out, you kind of go, "Yeah, sure," damn the consequences later. And I think obviously you made a decision. WDMP stands for, I believe, Wheeler Direct Marketing and Promotions, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So, what was it when you decided you were going to become a specialist agency? Was it something you decided to do right from the get go, and to not become generalist? What was it made you decide we're not going to do these things?
Yeah, so it was a conscious decision to become more of a specialist. But you're right. The first 3 or 4 years of WDMP, we chased all sorts of budgets.
Yeah,
Retail, shopper marketing, sales promotion. And you do get defined by the work that you do for your biggest client. And back then, our biggest client was Carphone Warehouse and TalkTalk, and we were doing lots of classic direct response and
Yeah.
starting to do CRM. But I think we had a real sense that, and came to the realization that if you're just executing, i.e., getting campaigns out the door, then it's a really tough place when procurement come knocking on your door and
Yeah.
demand that you reduce your rates or ask for rebates and so forth. And if you're just like 20,000 other agencies, in the UK, you don't really have anywhere to go but just to say yes to procurement. But if you're a specialist and you're helping clients solve their big strategic problems, or you've got proprietary products, there's stickiness in the relationship because you might be hosting their data, for example, and they
Hmm.
might be using one of your software or your portal. Then you can have a different conversation with procurement. In theory, you've got more opportunity to push back and be more confident. So we decided that we wanted to compete on knowledge, not on price as a
Yeah.
generalist. So being a specialist enables us to compete on knowledge.
Yeah. And you're right. The execution becomes a commodity, and then
Yes.
it's anyone. What's the
Yeah.
cheapest
And then
way
it's a
we can get
race
that done?
race to the
Yeah.
bottom, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm fascinated by this next question, though. So when you started and you started the agency, and I've worked with some startups in the past. I've had access to startup community, especially in Australia, thanks to a friend of mine. And one of the kind of questions is: are you growing this to sell it, or are you growing this as a long-term thing? Like this is a business you want to nurture and grow. Did you have a vision in mind when you started about how you wanted it to go in that regard?
I don't think it was anything quite so ambitious as that to start with. You know,
Mm.
because when you start off and there's two or three of you in a room, or even seven or eight of you, let's say, it tends to be about the now.
Yeah,
So that first year or two, it's all about creating a viable business. It's about recruiting the right people. People who understand the mission that you're trying to go on. You're running around doing new business and trying to keep clients happy. And even things like office space.
yeah,
Have we got enough office space for the next three or four people? Which might be increasing your headcount by 50%. And
yeah,
desks. So that first year or two tends to be about the now, and in many ways, the business runs you rather than you running the business.
yeah,
But then that does change over time, and then when you get to 20 or 30 of you, you need to start behaving differently, and you need to start having shared vision, shared values, and goals that the whole team can buy into.
yeah,
And I think the key to that is doing it together, doing it collectively. It shouldn't be a top down dictate from the board directors saying, right, this is what our culture is going to be and these are our values.
yeah,
You need input. But so the leadership team feed thought starters in, they feed in some core pillars, but you really must engage the team on the how and the why.
hmm,
So I think it's maybe only sort of 4 or 5 or 6 years in that you start thinking, okay, right, is this about legacy? Do
mm.
we want to go international? For example,
Yeah,
or do we want to build something to sell? But those first few years, it's really about just creating a viable business.
yeah. The 6 inches in front of your face, to quote Al Pacino from Any Given Sunday. Yeah, yeah. That's a fair point. And obviously, growth mostly, I would argue, come from an agency perspective, comes from the beloved pitch process. Um, and people bitch about pitches all the time in the industry. And to a large degree, I agree with them. They are kind of daft. It's a lot of time spent, a lot of ideas maybe pilfered by some more nefarious people, money wasted. But this conversation about pitches and how ineffective they are and all that kind of stuff has been going on for like in years. And nothing has really changed in all that time. So, from your perspective, what do you see that ever changing? Do you see pitches ever becoming less important or dying off, or is it just something that is so baked into the culture now that it's never going anywhere?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's so baked into the culture,
Yeah,
as you say, that I think it's here to stay. And let's face it, how many other sectors have to go through the same kind of hoops that we go through as marketing
Mm.
agencies? I mean, do lawyers go through what we have to? Do architects, for example, go through what we have to go through? I'm just, the number of times that you do a pitch and you win a pitch and then nothing happens afterwards because the client hasn't got the budget signed off beforehand, or
Yeah, that's always a
um,
fun one.
but I do think though that agencies can be their own worst enemies, around pitching. You know, we go for pitches that aren't really our core competence, and then we
Mm.
kind of wonder why we haven't won it.
Yeah,
We don't do enough due diligence from the outset about, is this a genuine brief? Are they genuinely looking to change agency? Is there a genuine budget here?
yeah.
Um, how many agencies are on the list? So we once turned down a pitch for, I think, for a football club, because they'd asked 15 agencies to pitch for a £20,000 budget, and then
Jesus.
they were a little bit put out that we weren't pitching for it. They
Oh
just
God.
didn't get it. So, like I say, agencies are their own worst enemy, and you and I have worked in an agency where they seem preoccupied by pitches. That's how they
Hmm.
kind of measure them. How many pitches have we got on the go? And they send out weekly emails on the number of pitches they're doing that week, and no mention of the great work that people around the agency are doing to
Mm.
get new opportunities from existing clients.
Yeah,
And when you think about it, what does it cost to pitch? Probably, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds
yeah.
in kind of resource hours to pitch.
Opportunity cost, those hours being billed somewhere else,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pitches turn the agency upside
Yes.
down, don't they? But, what about stopping a pitch,
Mm.
stop the brief going out to pitch? I think you and I did that quite successfully
Mm.
last year, didn't we, with one of our
Yep.
clients? There was an early discussion about pitching, and
Hmm.
because we were incredibly enthusiastic and shared a load of case studies, we managed to stop it going out to pitch. And I think that's got to be the holy grail.
Mm.
Uh, new from existing, but like I say, agencies don't help themselves because they just seem to be obsessed about pitching.
There's a larger cultural thing I think about the agencies, especially marketing agents, are obsessed by the new. Do you know what I mean? Whether that's new technology or new people or new clients or new, it's that whole thing about, to build a brand takes consistency and time. But we're always like, oh God, let's do something different. There's this. So I think there's this obsession with new in agency land, which doesn't bode well for them. So you talked about things that people mistakes people make around pitching. When people actually are pitching, what are the things that you've seen or even committed yourself? Let's heaven forfend mistakes you've made when pitching. What are some of the obvious ones that people are listening who maybe work at an agency should be trying to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Over the years, we've made all the mistakes under the sun, like everybody else. And, just give you a few examples. I think, there was one pitch where the creative director left most of the creative work, the boards. Remember, we used to present on
Oh
boards.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
He left most of the work in the agency.
Oh Christ.
There was another brief that came in when, the pitch team got the brief and then didn't talk to the client for 2 weeks and just sort of turned up on the day. And then, then they wondered why another agency got appointed, who
Yeah.
kind of talked to them several times and built rapport with them. So I think pitching actually is a science, not an art. And I think
Mm.
one of the big areas that everybody forgets is rehearsing.
Yeah.
You know, I think rehearsing is so important because let's face it, you have three or four agencies from the same kind of discipline. Let's just say, use an example of CRM, but it
Yeah.
could be social or advertising. You can all solve the brief. So
Yes.
actually, what's the client buying? They're buying a team of people, and they're, buying confidence. How many pitches have we worked on where you're finishing the document or the creative work right up to the point when to be leaving the office,
Yeah. Been
to go to
there.
the client's office? You might as well not turn up. So, my view is that rehearsing is really important,
Yeah.
and you need to come across as a unified team. All need to be on point with each other. There needs to be collective chemistry, and you don't do that by winging it and not rehearsing. So,
No.
we would always rehearse interjections from the team. So Rob, you might have been
Yeah.
presenting, I might interject, and that gives you time to think about your next slides. Time to pause, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm interjecting. You rehearse handovers between presenters, so everybody knows what they're doing. Questions that you want to ask the client, you rehearse. And even anticipating questions from the client. So we always have a thing that only two people respond to a question from a client, because the worst thing is we have like three or four people on your team
Yeah.
all answering a client question. So, we actually got to a point, because we made so many mistakes, that we had a set of guidelines
Oh,
on
that's cool.
pitching that we shared with the team. And we said to them, said, look, if you follow these guidelines and you lose, okay, fair enough. But if you don't follow these guidelines and you
Yeah.
lose,
Yeah.
then there'll be
We will
consequences.
be annoyed. Yeah.
Because it's all about giving you the best opportunity. And it was just things like, you need to finish your pitch 24 hours before the presentation day. So you need the document and the creative. And what that meant was that everybody got a good night's sleep the night before, because they weren't working till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. You had an opportunity to rehearse, and everybody was just, more relaxed. And,
Mm.
other things like, pitching is like a 100-meter sprint race. You have to come out fast, because you can't make that time up, because you've got 2 or 3 weeks. So another one of our guidelines was, well, within 24 hours of the brief arriving in the agency,
Hmm.
you get the senior stakeholders, the senior people in a room, and you crack the brief there and then. You know,
Right.
you all sit around, chew it
Yeah.
over, and then you develop a pitch on a page. And then it's just about executing the plan. It's about timings and writing up your slides.
Yeah.
It becomes a little bit easier.
I think that idea of a playbook is really interesting, because I'm trying to think where the agencies I've been, no one's ever kind of gone, okay, here's how we do pitches. Do you know what I mean? There's never been, you kind of get the gist of it as you go. But like I've done pitches like you were talking about, where we literally finished at 4 a.m. and the pitch was at 9 a.m. and I was, broken. It's not, it's very difficult to maintain any level of energy and enthusiasm. And you're absolutely right. To a large degree, they're buying not just what you say, but the large degree is it's how you say it and whether you come across in a slick. And I think it's one of those things that Jen, my fiance, talks about. Obviously, you're ex-classical musician. She always says, as a musician, you want to get so good and so well practiced and methodical with everything that you can improvise when you want to. So if you've rehearsed it and something, okay, well, now we can maybe start to riff off something else, or you can start to play because you know the material. Whereas if you don't, yeah, that's a lot harder to do, and then come back to where you were.
You're exactly right. And people don't like to rehearse,
Mm.
but actually they see the benefit of it. And
Yeah.
actually, it's more often not, it's the senior person in the agency that says that they don't need to rehearse. And actually, they can be some. We've all been sat in pitches when they've got 2 slides and they've got like 3 minutes to do the intro, and
Yeah.
because they haven't turned up to the rehearsal, they do it in 6 or 7 minutes, and then instantly the rest of the team are
Yeah.
under the clock, under the kibosh, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that's been interesting recently in the press is repitching, and the idea of whether you should repitch. Obviously, Adam and Eve DDB recently declined to repitch on John Lewis after I think 14 years and some extraordinary work between the two of them. And there's been a couple of times where it's come up, people just said, "No, I don't think so." As a general rule, it seems to be, I don't think this is fair, but don't repitch really. But what's your stance on it? When is the right time to take the chance to repitch, and when is it right not to take the chance? Well, not to repitch rather.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a judgment call, isn't it? Um, and you have to try and take the emotion out of it, I think. And so, is it a statutory review that's being led by procurement, in which case, it feels like you've got a good chance, or
Hmm.
you probably know whether your team have been doing a good, bad, or indifferent. And obviously, if it's the latter two of indifferent or bad, then you know that you shouldn't. But
Yeah.
it is fraught because sometimes the decision is made by a CFO, isn't it? We
Yes.
need to reduce our cost by 20%, kind of thing. But so we tried to take the emotion out of it, maybe less so about repitching,
Yeah.
but more about deciding on which briefs you do go for. And so, again, we had sort of 5 core principles to
Yeah.
help us decide what to go for.
Okay.
And, again, born out of, bad experiences, but, like, don't do pitches in an envelope. If a client says to you, we don't want you to come represent, and we haven't got time to meet you, send us a document, don't bother,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
don't bother doing that at all. Is it in your wheelhouse? I love that expression.
Yes.
Uh,
Well, I mean, with a surname like Wheeler, how could you not?
yeah. So, is it a client sector that you understand? Is it in your core competence?
Hmm.
Have you got a point of view? Have you got something interesting to say? And we also used to say, have we got a client friendly on the inside that can help guide us? What is the real boardroom challenge here that
Mm.
we could kind of get a bit of a steer on, I think. And, this might be a bit controversial, but we also used to say if it's just an out and out creative shootout, creative pitch, then we would not go for it because,
Mm.
you need something else to hang your hat on. Creative is just such a subjective process.
Yeah.
The CEO really liked the other agency's creative because it had pink in it, kind of thing. So, you really need to have something else to hang your hat on, whether that's kind of strategy or bespoke knowledge of that client sector or case studies.
Yeah. No, that's a fair shout, I think. So, thinking about sort of where agencies are and how they're currently valued, you sent me an interesting diagram, which I will try and post in the show notes, called the agency smile curve. And essentially, what it talks about is what is perceived to be value to the client versus where agencies make money. And the value to the client is in things like insights and strategy and the creative concepting and all those kind of things. Yet agencies still charge for time, for production, for all those kind of things. And as a result, clients don't necessarily see the value in the thinking, in the concepting, in all that kind of crucial parts of the process. Um, from your perspective, how do you change that model to be actually the value is in the thinking, not in the doing? Or are we all just doomed?
Oh, I think you're right. I think it's exactly that. Again, we talked about it a bit earlier, but if you're just doing and
Yeah.
executing, then and not really adding value, then it's a tough place. And I think this is a big subject matter. But my point of view is that agencies have to do things that clients can't do themselves.
Uh-huh.
Um, we have to innovate. We have to find new ways to make a difference. We have to keep moving the needle on engaging their customers. Because let's face it, clients are building agencies in house.
Yes.
So we have to, like I say, we have to kind of keep innovating and pioneering, and we need clever people to do that. Without a
Mm.
shadow of doubt, we need to be the cleverest people in the room, and
Yeah.
that's part of the problem. Are we attracting the best talent at the
Hmm.
moment? And just to give you an example, I've got a mate who is a partner in a global law firm,
Right.
and he was telling me the other day that to attract the best talent out there, that they pay their newly qualified lawyers. How much do you
Uh-huh.
think they pay a newly qualified lawyer?
Christ. I mean, six figures, I imagine. I don't know.
Well into six figures,
Right.
£165,000 a year.
Fuck. I picked the wrong career.
Yeah, but I mean, and we just can't compete on that. I mean, what do we pay ours? A fraction of
Yeah.
that. Do you start off as a graduate, 25, 30 grand sort of
Yeah.
thing? Maybe a bit more, maybe
Yeah.
maybe more than that. But but my point is that the reason that they can pay their newly qualified lawyers that amount
Mm.
is because they can recover it. You know,
Yes.
and they can charge handsomely because they're competing on knowledge, not competing on executing and doing. And I think
Mm.
there's a lesson there. And possibly, I don't think we are all doomed, but I think we do need to take a long look at ourselves and think about being marketing consultants as a start point.
Yes.
So, how can we understand a client's business better? How can we understand their challenges and their problems better, and how can we solve them? And I think a big bugbear of mine is when was the last time agency marketeers watched their client product being sold in retail in store? When was the last time they sat in a call center and listened
Mm-hmm.
in, to the calls? When was the last time they visited their showroom or chatted to their sales team? And the part of the problem that we're in at the moment is that if you suggest that to a planner, a creative, or a suit, they kind of like look at you as if you're mad, kind
Yeah.
of.
So
And
can't we do that with Mintel, or not that there's anything wrong with Mintel or desk research is very important, but yeah,
Google Planning, Rob,
yeah,
as they
yeah,
call it. Google Planning is, but so what I'm trying to say is that
yeah,
I don't think we are doomed, but we genuinely need to get aligned around solving clients' problems, and that way we will add value and start to be able to be paid appropriately for it.
yeah. I mean, look, you think about the big consultancy firms, the McKinseys, the Bains, the all that sort of stuff. My other half posted a tweet about it. And I don't read it. Lots of agency folks complaining about McKinsey lately, but whatever they're doing, it keeps working. They're more respected and higher fees, and nobody ever got fired for hiring them. So what are they doing that agencies aren't? And I think that's a really, really valid point
Yeah,
there. And they have access to higher up. They have all those kind of things. And I think
yeah.
whilst we keep, charging for production and not and devaluing thinking, I think that's a kind
Well, I
of
mean,
killer
they're
point.
brilliant, aren't they, at
Oh yeah,
building brand and selling at CEO level, the C-suite level.
yes,
Absolutely brilliant. And
absolutely.
I've often wondered, why are these management consultants, setting up agencies and acquiring agencies? But I guess it's because they can overlay the management consultancy rates
Yes,
on the agency
absolutely. Yeah,
and
yeah,
make a lot more money out of it. But
yeah. I mean, was it Accenture's Song? Isn't it? Is the obvious one that springs to mind. It'd be interesting to know from a creative perspective how like the cultural clash between a consultancy and an agency, and how much of it creeps in from consultancy to agency. But I'd love to. If there's anybody out there listening who's from Accenture Song would like to come on the podcast and discuss that, please let me know, because I think that'd be a really interesting discussion about that, whether there's a clash of culture or whether it works.
yeah, it'd be
You know?
brilliant to be on the fly on a wall, wouldn't it, in
Oh
that conversation?
yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thank you for that. Now you mentioned there's a few things there. You gave a bit of a little mini preview, if you like. So in the things that drive you nuts. And as you know, we have the Everybody Hates Your Brand Marketing Room 101, where our guests get to nominate things to be thrown into purgatory forever, things related to marketing or just business in general. And speaking to you prior to this, it seems like you've got quite a long list. So let's pick out one or two things that really annoy you.
Okay.
Let's do
I'm
this.
going to give you two, even though I've
Okay.
got a long list. Number one, NFTs. You know, I just think it represents everything that's wrong about our industry. Like you said, chase it earlier on,
Yeah,
chasing new
chasing the
things.
new. Yeah,
You know, sometimes we can be obsessed with kind of chasing the latest bandwagon, and we
yeah.
just have a fraction more knowledge than clients. And,
Which
quite
is
honestly,
even more dangerous because you're getting into Dunning Kruger territory there, where
yeah,
you know a little, but you think you know a lot. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I remember a marketing director at one of my clients, Philips, it was. And he said to me, he said, Craig, I don't understand why I'm paying my PR agency £70,000 to set up a Facebook page. I said to him, Mark, why are you? I mean, obviously,
yeah,
this
yeah. That's a
this
fair
was a long
question.
time ago. And I said, well, I shouldn't use his name. I said, well, why are you paying them £70,000?
Yeah,
Because they've just got a little bit of knowledge than you, Mark. Anyway,
yeah.
look, I think things like that are emperor's new clothes. And, as we've seen, with cryptocurrency and NFTs,
Mm,
they've just gone away. And
yes, very quickly. I think to give them I think there's a technology behind NFTs and behind Bitcoin, the blockchain stuff, where I think at some point there may be a valuable piece of, but just putting an SE in, it's basically just a gift that I can. I'll never. Yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't make any sense to me. So okay, I'm
emperor's new
happy to
clothes.
put NFTs in. So what
Oh,
is the other one?
yes.
You get that one in.
Okay.
What's the
This
next
is going to
one?
be slightly controversial,
Right.
uh, but lazy marketeers. So,
Okay.
I'm talking about
I'll get my coat. No.
journeymen or women, that they're not really passionate about marketing,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just there for the wage. So I remember having a conversation with an account manager, going up to them and saying, so, what are the big challenges that our clients are facing? What are we trying to help them with? And she sort of looked at me and said, well, we've got like 3 weeks to get the Christmas campaign out. It's like,
Wow.
no, remember we're marketeers, trying to solve their problems. So there are a lot of very passionate people about marketing, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
very passionate people about working with clients and helping solve their problems. But, we've all seen them, people that just turn up for a wage and
Mm-hmm.
don't really want to jump in.
Yeah. I,
with
I don't think there's no harm in coming to work, doing your job, and then going home again, as long as you're doing your job. Do you know what I mean? And you're doing it in the way in which it should be done. Completely agree with you on that. Okay, well, look, that's 2 entries to be added to the list of many. Like, I don't think what else has gone in there. Things like one of my favourites was Zoe Edwards from the recruitment consultant from the Industry Club, who said she put the phrase "not the right cultural fit" in, because she said, I know what it means, but I think it's everything that agencies should be against these days. So I think there's a few good ones there. There's an article probably to write them all out, and so people can see them. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. It's been hugely enlightening and hugely interesting. We could probably chat. I've got a bunch more questions. We could chat for another hour and a bit. So, but we'll probably wrap it up there. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks.
Cheers.
It was great chatting to you, Rob.
Craig is a fascinating man, and I hope that came across in the interview. I think it did. He's a man of experience and opinions and interesting thoughts and a little bit of cynicism, which I like. I hope you learned something. I hope you found some interesting nuggets to take forward in your marketing career, whether agency side or client side. We'll be back soon with another interview, and in the meantime, take great care and be vigilant.